Good evening. Tonight the world is watching as the U.S. sends a powerful carrier group, led by the USS Abraham Lincoln, toward the Middle East. This is a direct response to rising tensions with Iran. The move signals that the U.S. is ready to act if necessary. The Pentagon calls it deterrence, but many fear it's a step toward open conflict. The carrier strike group was operating in the South China Sea, but now heads to U.S. Central Command's area, right in the heart of the Middle East. This deployment is a message. The U.S. is watching Iran closely. The region is a web of alliances and rivalries. Any conflict here could quickly spiral. A US-Iran war would threaten global oil supplies and disrupt vital shipping lanes. That's why this single carrier group's movement is making headlines worldwide. The decisions made in Washington and Tehran could mean peace or a devastating war. Why now? Iran has been rocked by weeks of protests. The government's response has been brutal, drawing international condemnation. The U.S. says it cannot ignore the violence. President Trump has warned Iran of grave consequences. The USS Abraham Lincoln's deployment is the muscle behind those words. This is not just about military might, it's about sending a clear warning. The world is holding its breath, hoping for restraint. The next moves by both sides could shape the Middle East for decades. Understanding these events is crucial as the crisis unfolds. To grasp the U.S. response, we must look inside Iran. Since December 2025, Iran has faced massive protests over a collapsing economy. What began as economic frustration quickly turned into calls for political change, spreading nationwide. The government's crackdown has been severe, thousands killed, many more detained. Human rights groups call it the worst repression in decades. The regime is using force to silence dissent, but anger simmers beneath the surface. Pro-government rallies were staged to show support, but the unrest hasn't truly faded. The crackdown has deepened resentment and created a human rights crisis. The U.S. sees this as a moment of weakness for Iran's regime. The Trump administration frames its actions as support for the Iranian people. Reports of mass killings have fueled calls for action in Washington. The protests and brutal response are now central to the U.S.-Iran standoff. The fate of these protesters is at the heart of an international crisis. The world is watching and the stakes are rising. The U.S. military buildup is a direct response to this turmoil. The crisis inside Iran is now a global flashpoint. The White House has made its position clear. All options are on the table. This is a warning. Military action is possible if Iran's crackdown continues. The strategy is to pressure Iran into changing course without firing a shot. But mixed messages from President Trump have created uncertainty. One day, he hints at negotiations. The next, he threatens consequences. This unpredictability keeps Iran and U.S. allies on edge. Beyond words, the U.S. is acting. The USS Abraham Lincoln is now within striking distance of Iran. Key personnel have been withdrawn from the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar after Iranian threats. The U.S. Embassy in Doha has issued security alerts. These are not routine moves. They signal real preparation for conflict. New sanctions target top Iranian officials responsible for the crackdown. Some in Washington are even discussing what a post-regime Iran might look like. The U.S. is combining military, economic, and political pressure. The world is left guessing what comes next. Iran is not backing down. Tehran blames the U.S. and Israel for stirring unrest and accuses them of trying to destabilize the country. Iranian leaders are rallying their people against what they call foreign aggression. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is on high alert, vowing to respond to any attack. State TV has issued chilling warnings, referencing past assassination attempts and threatening retaliation. Iran has threatened to target U.S. troops and Israel if attacked. The U.S. has responded by moving personnel from its base in Qatar. Iran briefly closed its airspace, signaling its ability to disrupt the region. These moves have created confusion and heightened tensions. Despite the threats, Iran's foreign minister is quietly visiting neighboring countries, seeking diplomatic support. Iran is projecting strength at home while exploring diplomatic options abroad. The dual strategy, defiance and diplomacy. The risk of miscalculation is high. Both sides are on edge, and the region is bracing for what comes next. The world is watching for any sign of de-escalation. Every move is being scrutinized. The stakes could not be higher. The crisis is at a tipping point. Iran's neighbors are deeply anxious. A U.S.-Iran war would unfold on their doorstep, threatening their security and economies. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, and Turkey are urging restraint and pushing for diplomacy. Some are lobbying Washington directly, warning against airstrikes. Saudi Arabia has even refused U.S. requests to use its airspace for attacks on Iran. This shows just how worried the Gulf states are about Iranian retaliation. Qatar, hosting the vital Al Udeid Air Base, is in a delicate position, balancing U.S. ties with its relationship with Iran. Recent violence in Doha has only heightened tensions. The Gulf states fear a conflict would shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a lifeline for global oil and gas. Any disruption would send shockwaves through the world economy. Their prosperity depends on safe shipping lanes. Regional leaders are making urgent calls, trying to pull everyone back from the brink. The Gulf states know a war would be catastrophic for all. They are desperate to prevent escalation. The world's energy supply hangs in the balance. The region's stability is on a knife's edge. The next days are critical. The crisis has reached the United Nations Security Council. The U.S. called an emergency meeting to spotlight Iran's crackdown and build global pressure, but the session exposed deep divisions among world powers. The U.S. and U.K. condemned Iran, calling for more sanctions and international action. Iran's envoy accused the U.S. and Israel of manufacturing the crisis as a pretext for intervention. Russia and China sided with Iran, warning that U.S. threats are making things worse. The UN's own officials caution that military threats only increase instability. There is no agreement on the facts, let alone a solution. The Security Council is at a stalemate. The world is not speaking with one voice. This division makes a peaceful resolution even harder. The crisis is now a global diplomatic challenge. The stakes are rising, and the clock is ticking. The world is watching, but unity is elusive. We are at a crossroads. The next steps could lead to talks, or to war. Intense pressure might force Iran to negotiate, but the window for diplomacy is closing. A single miscalculation could trigger a devastating conflict. War would draw in the U.S., Iran, Israel, and the Gulf states, with catastrophic consequences. Global energy supplies would be threatened, prices would soar, and millions could be displaced. The world cannot afford another Middle East war. The movement of the USS Abraham Lincoln is a symptom of deeper mistrust and unresolved tensions. The choices made now will shape the region and the world for years. The world watches and waits. Will leaders choose diplomacy or stumble into war? The stakes could not be higher. The future of the Middle East and global stability hangs in the balance. Cooler heads must prevail. The world is hoping for peace,